They have now presented more than 30 cases of abuse that date back to 2003. The latest cases include an accusation that 2 British soldiers raped a 16-year-old boy. The Armed Forces Minister, Bill Rammell, promised each case would be investigated thoroughly, but said allegations should not be taken as fact. James Shaw reports.
There were solemn ceremonies earlier this year to mark the British pullout from southern Iraq. Before that, many Iraqis are said to have been too scared to come forward because British troops were still in the country. Since then, a whole new series of abuse claims has been uncovered by human rights campaigners. A 16-year-old boy says he was sexually abused by 2 soldiers. One man says he was hit and kicked, and an electric baton was used on parts of his body. He says a fellow detainee was forced to strip and that soldiers took photos while he was sexually molested.
I've been investigating these cases since 2004, and every time I think I've seen the worst, I'll be shocked to learn of a new story which I've never imagined that will happen.
Lawyers for the former detainees say a pattern of abuse is emerging.
It's very important now that there should be no further attempt by this government and the Ministry of Defence to sweep this under the carpet. The few bad apples thesis does not work.
Mr. Shiner is already representing the family of Baha Mousa at the inquiry into his death. Mr. Mousa was a hotel receptionist who died in a British custody centre with 93 injuries. The inquiry has seen video of Mr. Mousa and others being interrogated. The Ministry of Defence insists these are isolated cases.
Died. At one point in Donald Payne's evidence, Mr. Mousa's father left the room in tears. Donald Payne, who we can't identify, today told the inquiry he was not the only man involved, that all members of the unit guarding the detainees, commanded by Lieutenant Craig Rogers, had kicked and punched them. And with one detainee, he claimed, "I observed Lieutenant Rogers place a jerry can of petrol in front of the young boy. He poured water over him and then lit a match." The detainees were being kept in the right-hand room, but at some point Baha Mousa was moved into the toilet, apparently after trying to get out of his plastic handcuffs. It was in here that the fatal blows were struck. Donald Payne denied that he'd smashed his head against a wall. So who is responsible for what happened in here?
Many people have been responsible for what went wrong, from very senior level to very low level. Mr. Payne was at a relatively low level, and he bears heavy responsibility for much, but by no means all of it.
Donald Payne also claimed today that his commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel George Mendonça, who was cleared of any wrongdoing at a court-martial, was, in general, gung-ho and somewhat trigger-happy. He said the much-decorated commander had once interrogated a prisoner about weapons. The prisoner did not reply, and the CO then cocked his pistol and said he was going to blow his face off. Donald Payne's evidence comes after it emerged at the weekend that the Ministry of Defence is investigating over 30 other allegations of abuse, for which lawyers for the Iraqis also want to see a public inquiry. They say there was, in Iraq, a culture of abuse. The Ministry of Defence insists that the training of troops has now improved. Caroline Hawley, BBC News.